Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Colby, to you and your family. I asked the following two initial questions with relevance to fitness to serve. So I'll ask you, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
I have not, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
I have not, Senator.
I think it's interesting that you would not say whether Russia invaded Ukraine and that saying that this is a complicated kind of a situation right now. But I think I also heard you say that you would give the president your best advice regardless of what you think he might want to hear. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Relating to whether Russian military forces invaded Ukraine. In February 2022, did Russian forces cross the border and invade Ukraine, yes or no?
Well, Senator, you're describing a factual reality that is demonstrably true.
Yes, so that would mean that Russia invaded Ukraine. So that was a question that you would not answer. I think that's pretty important because if we care about what Xi Jinping thinks about what this president does and thinks, and if Xi Jinping thinks that we have a president who does not separate fact from fiction, such as who invaded Ukraine, I would think that maybe President Xi has conclusions that he would draw, maybe having to do with, as our ranking member said, U.S. fecklessness. And I also think that one of the reasons that our NATO allies are increasing their spending on military is that they do not think that they have a particularly stable partner in the U.S., and therefore they better look to their own interests because they can no longer rely on the U.S. I think that is a very bad situation for the United States to be in, especially as we identify China as a pacing threat, and also whatever Russia is thinking along these lines, they think that they now have a friend in the president. I don't think that helps us vis-a-vis our strength regarding Russia, regarding China. In fact, I think that we are placing ourselves in a very weakened position with regard to how we are viewed by our adversaries, that would be China as well as Russia, and our allies are not a good situation to be in. We need a president who can separate fact from fiction. Let me move on. Since the administration has identified China as a pacing threat and the importance of Indo-PACOM to face that threat, would you agree with that?
Yes, I think the department has identified China as the pacing
threat. But Indo-PACOM provided Congress with an $11 billion unfunded priorities list. And this says to me that there is a misalignment of our funding decisions and strategy if we consider Indo-PACOM to be a priority, and yet you have Indo-PACOM putting forward an $11 billion unfunded priorities. What would you do to decrease the unfunded priorities and align our strategy and the importance of Indo-PACOM with the resources that it gets? And would you agree that maybe we should provide Indo-PACOM with more direct input into the department's budgeting and resourcing priorities?
Well, Senator, what I'd like to say is, if I may, is I think this is exactly the kind of baseline reality that I think so much of my strategic argumentation proceeds from. A lot of what I'm saying is that many of us in the public debate and so forth are acting as if we can do everything, but the reality is that there's an $11 billion unfunded priority list from Indo-PACOM, and realistically, I bet the real deficit is even higher, given that that's just what came out. So, Senator, if confirmed, I would make it an absolute priority, given the priority that China must get across administrations. I think this is now a matter of strategic consensus to try to not only drive that down, but to reform the department and reprioritize it, to actually go through and carry out the strategic shift that's been talked about in some ways since probably Bob Work was Deputy Secretary of Defense at the end of the Obama administration.
So would you agree that Indo-PACOM, that command should be provided with more direct input into the department's budgeting and resourcing process?
Senator, I don't have enough information to say specifically organizationally where I would fall on that, but certainly that perspective needs to get, I would say, an elevated.
I hope so, because an 11 billion unfunded priority, that is the largest unfunded priority list of any of our combatants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.